Chapter 429 Strange Body Composition. Wei Rong pulled a long face when he heard the objections from the students. His already rough look turned even fiercer and more intimidating. "Enough!" Wei Rong yelled in a rough voice. His voice quickly covered the sound of the crowd, as if none of them dared to make any noise when Wei Rong clenched his brow. The students of the fire school were fairly respectful of their elemental director. Wei Rong glanced at the students of the fire school and spoke, "Today, I'm totally disappointed by you all. It's meaningless for the duel to keep going from this point onward. Initially, I desired every student in the fire school to become an elite, an outstanding magician, which is why I was strict to a transfer student whom I assumed had given up on his previous element halfway. However, he has proven to everyone that he's no weaker than most of the students from the fire school. If you're really not satisfied with the result, then fight him in a fair duel in the future, instead of stirring up a scene here to save a little bit of your dignity. Dignity is something you earn with your hands. I hope that one day, a student of our fire school is able to defeat this transfer student at his peak. That will be the best justification to the school." Wei Rong's words echoed in the students' minds. Most of them were simply demanding an ending they could accept for the matter on hand, yet they had totally ignored the fact that they had lost the duels. Many began to feel ashamed. Bai Mei nodded with a slight smile. If Wei Rong had done this earlier, he would have stopped the criticism from the other elemental schools. "Mo Fan, down you go. Your injuries aren't light at all. Any delay further might affect your recovery," said Bai Mei. Mo Fan nodded. He was indeed feeling extremely uncomfortable. Luckily, Dean Xiao had made it in time. He went down from the stage, and as he passed by Dean Xiao, he murmured, "Old man, why did you come so late?" Dean Xiao glared at him and responded, "Is it that hard to stay out of trouble?" Mo Fan chuckled without commenting any further. "Go ahead and treat your wounds," Dean Xiao blurted out after he saw Mo Fan's injuries. Mo Fan quickly left the dueling ground. No matter how dissatisfied the people of the fire school or the other elements were, they had no choice but to leave the place. That being said, talk about the duels that had lasted from the morning to late at night were surely going to spread wildly through the school. "It's not too bad. The fire resistance granted by your soul seed's flame is fairly strong. Someone else would suffer from lingering effects of the burn for a few months without getting treated in time. The healing magic I've given you can only treat the wounds on your skin, but there are still some lingering effects in your body. You'll have to consume some countering medicine for a week," said Bai Mei, after giving Mo Fan a thorough check-over. Mo Fan nodded. From what he recalled, the lingering effect of a burn was something he shouldn't underestimate. Otherwise, it might slowly penetrate his inner organs. By that time, healing magic would be fairly useless against it. He could only use a significant amount of medicine and other recovery magic to heal it slowly. The medicine was relatively costly, and something that most hunters spent lots of money on. "Thanks, Mr. Bai Mei," said Mo Fan. "By the way, something is a little strange about your body composition. Did your body go through some kind of irregular modification?" said Bai Mei all of a sudden. "Is there something wrong about it?" asked Mo Fan. "I can't really tell. Normally, the injuries of those who are suffering from a burn will slowly worsen, posing a threat to their lives when the condition worsens to a certain level. However, I discovered that your wounds are already showing signs of recovery when you came down from the stage," said Bai Mei. "Isn't that a good thing? It's just showing that my body can heal faster." Bai Mei shook his head and continued after looking him up and down. "I wouldn't mention it if it was a normal recovery. Something is a bit strange about your body. If possible, I suggest finding a more proficient healer to give your body a thorough exam. I can sense some kind of irritable element inside your body, and it's not any magic element, white magic, or dimensional magic that we usually see. If anything, it bears similarities to black magic." Mo Fan glanced at Mr. Bai Mei in astonishment. He had once acquired the power of the demon element. However, some aged magicians in the southern military had confirmed that most of the residue of the demon element in his body had dissipated. This Bai Mei's cultivation was fairly outstanding, otherwise, he would not be able to sense the remnants of it. If the demon element could be considered an element, it would surely be listed as a black magic. Mo Fan could not help but be impressed by this teacher. "All right, I'll ask around." "Thanks, sir," answered Mo Fan. Mo Fan was worn out by the time he arrived back at his apartment. Ai Tutu swung her large breasts around while talking to Mo Fan, who was lying on the couch continuously. The girl seemed exceedingly excited. Her gleaming eyes were somewhat surprisingly displaying a slight hint of admiration toward Mo Fan. On the other hand, Mu Nujiao was more worried about his injuries. She blamed him for stirring up trouble just after he had returned to school. Mo Fan fell asleep halfway without knowing it. He was indeed too tired, but he did enjoy himself in the duels. Mo Fan woke up at midnight and saw he was covered in a thick blanket. The previously lively living room was silent. Mo Fan took a can of cider from the fridge and switched to lying on the balcony, where the air was much fresher. The overall strength of the students here at the main campus is a lot stronger than I imagined. Those born with innate soul seeds were only ranked slightly over 100 in the fire school. Doesn't that mean lots of people ranked in the top 100 have a chance to defeat me, and those ranked in the top 50 or even top 10 are pretty much a bunch of monsters? Mumbled Mo Fan after taking a sip from the pineapple cider. He was only in one of the element schools in the main campus. If all the elements were combined, the number of experts would be comparable to the number of hairs on a cow. It was not an easy task for him to stand out among them. He still had lots of room for improvement. If he managed to find himself a contracted beast, his strength would improve significantly. He should try and level up his lightning nebula to the 3rd tier, too. Not to mention his shadow element, which was still at the 1st tier. The giant shadow spike, twins, was an extremely useful spell. Last but not least, equipment. He only had 2 pieces of equipment. It was said that those ranked in the top 50 each had a set of equipment. If he were to fight against any of them, he would find himself at a disadvantage because of his equipment. It seemed like he should be cultivating more diligently, to fill up the current gaps in his strength. Chapter 430. Your snake scales are trash. Sigh. His cultivation had not improved at all for half a year. It was not a good thing for him. The competition in the main campus was more intense than what he had imagined, and the distribution of the resources was fairly straightforward. In order to level up his lightning nebula to the 3rd tier, he had to cultivate in the 3-step tower. The cultivation speed granted by the little loach pendant was enough for Mo Fan to pass the accumulation period fairly quickly, but to have a breakthrough in his cultivation, he had to rely on external assistance from unique places like the 3-step tower, which contained a high concentration of the elemental energy. Only those ranked in the top 50 were allowed to cultivate in the 3-step tower. He was currently ranked 100th, still a distance away from reaching his goal. He also needed a week for his body to recover. Although he had cleared the challenges, there was no way he could challenge someone for the rest of the week. I should try and secure a higher rank in the 2nd challenge week. Mo Fan grabbed the can and emptied the cool cider into his throat after roughly setting his direction in mind. The lingering effect from the burn was rather annoying. He kept feeling that something was burning in his body, giving him a dull pain. Drinking something icy did not necessarily make any difference, but it just felt so good. The 4th week every month was the 2nd challenge week. In the 1st challenge week, Mo Fan was forced to take on consecutive challenges, but half a month later, it was his time to climb the ranking. The resources given by the school were quite generous. If he could not secure the highest possible rank, his cultivation would fall behind fairly quickly. After feeling that he had fully recovered after a week's rest at home, Mo Fan recalled what old Bao had mentioned and went to the Dongfang Oriental Tower with his beloved snake scales. With the introductory letter in hand, Mo Fan went to the main hall of the Magic Association, and quickly located the armor forge master, Huo Tuo, who was rather famous inside the tower. Huo Tuo was highly respected. He even had his own luxurious guest room in the Magic Association. Due to the height of the Magic Association's location in the Oriental Pearl Tower, one could easily capture the most beautiful moment of the Huangpu River through the French windows. The 2 most authoritative magic associations in the country were the Magic Palace in the capital, Beijing, and the Dongfang Pearl Magicians. Therefore, someone with a guest room like this was definitely no ordinary person. It seemed like this old Bao was indeed a reclusive expert. "Hi, I'm Mr. Huo's disciple, Li Junin," said a young man in a neat attire politely. "Oh, hello. I'm here for Mr. Huo." "Is he in?" said Mo Fan as he glanced at the man with the shameless name. TL note: Junin means handsome man in Chinese. "He is in, it's just that his temper isn't very good," said Li Junin softly. "I understand, but old Bao has told me that only Mr. Huo Tuo can handle the material I have, so I do hope you can tell him that," Mo Fan said sternly and sincerely. A constructor was usually an earth magician, while most of the forge masters were lightning and fire magicians. The rare bones, scales, and skin from demon beasts had a unique composition, which was impossible to break down with ordinary machinery. They had to rely on the forge master's special fires to smelt them, or lightning to conduct electrolysis. The process was similar to gold smelting. In order to turn gold into jewelry, they first smelted the gold, then used magical equipment to cool the gold down and solidify, forming the shape they needed. Similarly, the material used to craft equipment had to be smelted first. Otherwise, how could the material they obtained from the demon beasts possibly be in usable shapes like boots, armor, bracelets, pendants, rings, and so on? Besides, since the equipment was bound to the user's soul, they needed to be activated prior to using them. In this world, only the rare skin, bones, claws, scales, feathers, and such of monstrous beasts contained the energy required to bind them to human souls, hence why many hunters were collecting them by hunting demon beasts in the wild. They were only interested in acquiring materials that could be bound to human souls for crafting equipment. The scales Mo Fan was holding onto were rare scales of the snake species, but what exactly was the black totem snake's rank? A boss among bosses, a war machine among ruler-level creatures. His rare scales were clearly too complicated to be worked by ordinary forge masters. Old Bao had made that extremely clear to Mo Fan. This Li Junan was obviously sent by Huo Tuo to chase him away. Mo Fan went straight to the point instead of beating about the bush. Li Junan was not too happy when he heard Mo Fan's words. He was a disciple taught by Huo Tuo himself, thus he could basically handle everything that his teacher was capable of. Besides, what could a 20-year-old magician possibly have that he could not handle? Can you show me your rare scales? Li Junan still had enough manners to not fall out immediately. That being said, he was not someone with a great temper, either. If the guy's material was deemed worthless by his discerning eye, he would tell him to leave the tower, take the second line of the subway to East Nanjing Station, then take the 10th line there to Tiantong Road Station. He would find lots of forge masters at the stalls on Qipu Road. TL note: Qipu Road is famous for having a clothing wholesale market. Sure thing. Mo Fan opened his bag and took out the blue-black snake scales. The truth was, he only had 2 pieces of the snake scales, but due to the black totem snake's enormous size, the scales were basically as huge as a piece of garment. The blue-black scales were placed on the table. They somehow resembled a piece of old leather that was just taken out from the furnace, instead of something glistening like a priceless treasure piece. Why did it look so horrible? Mo Fan had no clue, since he had received it from Tong Yue. On second thought, if the scales were glistening, why would the black totem snake take them off? What the heck is this black piece of shit? Can you please? Li Junan coldly harumphed. He was just about to teach Mo Fan how to take the subway, when he suddenly discovered something strange about the scales. They didn't even have any snake marks. He should at least let the idiot know. Have you heard of snake marks? Yeah, said Mo Fan. Your material is garbage. Why is that? Mo Fan raised his brows. The rarer the snake, the finer the snake marks. Your scales don't even have any snake marks on them. It's totally black. Did you pull it from a servant-class creature? Asked Li Junan haughtily. Mo Fan took a closer look. His material was indeed solid black, without any trace of a snake mark. However, these were 2 pieces of the black totem snake's scales. The snake marks were usually visible when looking at the whole snake. How could it possibly be visible on just 2 pieces of scales? The slight hint of blue on the material was part of the marks. Chapter 431. Have you heard of a vampire before? Can I clarify that these scales aren't the entire snake? Said Mo Fan. Li Junan burst out laughing. It did not matter if the scales took up an entire snake or half a snake. They still had no mark on them. Hence, they were garbage. Oh, I can't really say they are garbage. These rare scales could be sold for millions, which this petty magician probably considers a significant sum. Unfortunately, the material was far from worthy in his eyes. Mo Fan pointed at the scales and said, "The mark is right there. The blue spot." Li Junan snapped when he saw the man pestering him endlessly. "Do you think I'm blind? There's nothing there. Take your stuff and leave." Mo Fan almost burst out crying. He tried to explain to the man, yet when he saw the infuriated look on his face, he knew that the man would never believe him. "What's with the noise here, little Li? Do you want to get sacked?" Don't you know that your master hates being disturbed the most? Yelled an old man whose brows, mustache, and hair were all purple. Li Junin hurriedly apologized to his teacher and glared at Mo Fan. Mo Fan knew it was difficult to deal with the imp. As such, he quickly uttered, "Mr. Huo, I'm Mo Fan, here after being recommended by old Bao. I'm well aware of your reputation as a forge master in the Magic City, and I've visited quite some famous forge masters. Yet, they all told me that only Mr. Huo is capable of handling such a unique material, hence, I've been waiting for you here patiently." Li Junin opened his eyes wide. How shameless was this young man? What did he mean by waiting patiently? He got here less than 5 minutes ago. Enough with the pestering. Do you think my master will be tricked just because you're fawning over him? Li Junin was in the midst of his speech when he heard the door behind being pushed open. Li Junin turned around and saw his master walking out in his well-ironed shirt in a demeaning manner. His face was expressionless, like that of a reclusive expert, but his eyes were glistening with a hint of pride. He came up and said disdainfully, "Ling Shi, Gu Sulian, Che Rong. How could you compare those dim-sighted old pricks to me? I guess they are well aware of their limits, knowing that I, Huo Tuo, am specialized in dealing with all kinds of rare materials. What do you have there? Let me take a look." Mo Fan was overjoyed when he saw Huo Tuo coming out from the room. Meanwhile, Li Junin felt like slapping his own head. How did he end up with such an unreliable master? Li Junin spoke before Mo Fan could respond. "Master, didn't you already teach me how to identify the lineage of a snake species? Normally, those with a higher lineage will have more defined snake marks. This material is totally black, with no sign of any snake mark. I'm sure that it's a very common material." Huo Tuo walked up to the scales and inspected them carefully, while his expression kept changing rapidly. "You idiot! Didn't I tell you to put precious materials on the best ice sheets? Why did you put them on the table? Look how dirty the table is. Do you know how much extra effort I need to put in if the materials catch even the slightest dust?" Huo Tuo turned around and scolded Li Junin. Huo Tuo quickly grabbed an ice sheet and slowly transferred the snake scales onto them. The flicker in his eyes now displayed a hint of greed. Such a pity, these aren't really rare scales. Otherwise, they would be extremely precious. Huo Tuo let out a sigh in the end. Mo Fan immediately had a different view of the old man. How impressive, these scales have been purified. It's not a real rare material. It's not too bad, just that the purification could be slightly better, so I can craft a piece of very advanced armor equipment from it, said Huo Tuo. Li Junin almost went crazy. What in the world? So the material was actually man-made, without any snake mark? It was a fake, something you could find from the street stalls? "Master, are you sure that you don't want me to throw him out?" said Li Junin. "Throw what out? Your stupidity is urging me to throw you out instead. Who told you they didn't have any snake mark? The mark is so big that it's covering the entire material," snapped Huo Tuo. Li Junin was utterly confused, and muttered under his breath, "That's just the color of the skin. A mark is a mark." Mo Fan felt sorry for Li Junin, who was being condemned. He said softly, "What you're seeing are just 2 extremely small scales from the snake. Its snake mark is blue, so you'd need a few pieces of them together to see the actual shape of the mark." Li Junin opened his eyes wide and blurted out, "How could a snake be that huge?" Li Junin's exclamation served as a reminder to Huo Tuo, who was still admiring the snake scales. He glanced at Mo Fan in astonishment, and asked, "Could this material possibly be?" Mo Fan nodded with a smile. He knew the old man was an expert. Who would have thought? No wonder old Bao recommended you here. "It's true that the others are clueless about what to do with it," said Huo Tuo. The black totem snake was no longer a secret, thus, Huo Tuo easily guessed the origin of the snake scales. "Then I have a favor to ask Mr. Huo. I want to craft a piece of armor," said Mo Fan. "That's fine, but the queue is currently until the end of next year," said Huo Tuo. Mo Fan was left speechless. The end of next year? He might not even have the chance to wear it before the hunter competition took place. "Can't you make an exception?" asked Mo Fan. "Sure, just pay me 3 times the normal price, including the fees for working on public holidays," Huo Tuo said indifferently, while admiring the material. Mo Fan's forehead was covered in frown lines. "Can't you do it for free, considering that it's such a rare material?" To fully display your passion in pursuing art instead of money when you decided to become a forge master? Mo Fan asked shamelessly. Enough with the nonsense. Just pay me the right amount. If you can't afford the extra fees, come do some work for me, then. Old Bao has quite some talented hunters. It happens that I'm in need of some material, and normal hunters are not brave enough to accept my requests, said Huo Tuo. I have to go to school still. Mo Fan was unwilling. Who said anything about going to the wild? It's something here in the Magic City, said Huo Tuo. Tell me about it first, replied Mo Fan. The Magic City was huge, and was basically an ecosystem. Humans were not the only residents here. There were quite a few demon beasts too. Mo Fan had already learned that from his past experiences. There was no way Mo Fan could afford paying 3 times the price. Since Old Bao had already told him that the cost to craft a piece of armor, even after his recommendation, was a whopping 20 million RMB. Mo Fan could only afford it after selling the corpse of the Xuanwu giant lizard and adding some from his own pocket. 3 times the price would be 60 million RMB. It was no different than robbing him. Have you heard of vampires? Whispered Huo Tuo. Like you? Mo Fan promptly asked in return. How impolite. I'm referring to those that act like humans in the day, but prey on women at night. The demon beasts disguise themselves as humans, and need a human's blood to maintain their power. These vampires originate from the West, explained Huo Tuo. Chapter 432 for Justice. Vampires? Mo Fan had only seen them in novels or movies, and they were normally extraordinarily handsome, just like himself. Wait, did you just say they ambush women? Asked Mo Fan. Huo Tuo nodded and said, these vampires have their unique tastes. They don't just attack all women, but choose their prey carefully. The prey is normally gorgeous in our eyes, yet different vampires have different fetishes. Some prefer those with long hair, some prefer virgins, and some like fair, tender skin. Are you sure they only suck their blood? Asked Mo Fan, his brows raised. How would I know? I've only heard that the blood-sucking process takes quite a while, so they will normally find a remote place to enjoy themselves. As long as the sun has not risen, they can do whatever they want to the women with their fangs, Huo Tuo said sternly. Assholes! Who knew that such a bunch of jerks would exist in this world? How dare they not show any respect to me, snapped Mo Fan. As the guardian of young women who hid under the night curtains of the large city, Mo Fan would never tolerate the acts of these vampires. If he could not purge and exterminate them, it would be a disgrace to his title as a Magic City law enforcer. When he saw that Mo Fan was rather intrigued, Huo Tuo added, I need a fang, a vampire's fang. I'm still waiting for someone to accept the quest I've submitted to the Hunter Union. They don't believe that these creatures exist, but I'm confident that they are living here in the Magic City, and have already preyed on lots of women. Wait, so, are these vampires humans or demon beasts? Asked Mo Fan. Huo Tuo laughed and said, would it make any difference? Either humans or demon beasts, those who have done something intolerable shall be punished accordingly. Maybe their lineage is similar to humans, but their actions are no different from a demon beast. Mo Fan glanced at the old man in astonishment. He never thought the old man would say something worth pondering on. The old man was right. Since no one is taking the quest, it must be ranked fairly high. I'll get you the vampire's fang, and you'll not charge me the extra fees. I'm just a student, a povo, said Mo Fan. Then 2 fangs, Huo Tuo spread his fingers. Mo Fan cursed furiously, you're more like a vampire. Are you stupid or brainless? If you get your hands on a vampire, would he only have 1 fang? Chided Huo Tuo. Mo Fan kept his face blank. The old man was absolutely right about that. If even the hunters can't find any clue about these creatures, you have to give me a lead. The Magic City is so huge, and so populated. Where do I even start from? Said Mo Fan. I can't offer much, either. Once, I was taking the subway, but I missed the train, so I ended up waiting there for a very long time. I just happened to see a vampire feeding on his prey, but unfortunately, I couldn't save her in time. She died due to excessive loss of blood by the time I got her to the hospital. However, the doctors diagnosed that she had died from a sudden heart attack, instead of excessive loss of blood. I told the Hunter Union and the Magic Association that she was attacked by a human-like creature, yet when they checked the surveillance, they didn't even see the creature. They assumed that I imagined it. There might not be a creature like that in our country, but it's real in the West. They have come here to feed, and I happened to stumble onto one while he was enjoying his prey. I'm not a righteous man, but I tried my best to save the girl, so I thought that would be the end of it, until I learned from an ancient Western manual that the fangs of these vampires are the perfect material. So you're saying that the only clue is the girl that died? Mo Fan asked furiously. Huo Tuo nodded and spoke. The quest wouldn't have such a huge bounty if it were any easier. I'll give you the girl's name, and you're on your own. When you give me the fangs, I'll give you the armor. Otherwise, you will pay me 60 million RMB, not a cent less. I've got one more question. Go ahead. You're already an expert at sucking money. Why did you have to take the subway instead of taking a cab? Said Mo Fan. Huo Tuo fondled his beard and said, You have no idea. It's called being conservative. Mo Fan and Huo Tuo had a long discussion. Meanwhile, Li Junin muttered, I also have a question. Neither Mo Fan nor Huo Tuo gave him any attention. Li Junin seemed utterly troubled. He still could not understand. What good were snake scales without any snake mark? Mo Fan counted the days. There were only 7 days left until the second challenge week. If he was planning to wear the armor during that week, he had 7 days to find the vampire and smack his fangs out. He definitely needed Ling Ling's help for things like this. The quest's rank was fairly high, since the fees for asking the old man to craft the armor alone were already 20 million RMB. Leaving the old man's intention of increasing the price to 3 times the normal value aside, quests with a bounty of 10 million and above were normally for advanced magicians, and most of them even needed a party of advanced magicians. However, Huo Tuo could surely read Mo Fan's cultivation. The fact that he was willing to let Mo Fan handle it implied that the vampire's strength was not too crazy. The biggest problem now was knowing where to find a vampire. In such a populated area, unlike the mother-scale skin phantom which would turn into a monster, Huo Tuo had mentioned that the vampires looked exactly like humans. It was impossible to identify them unless he stumbled onto one while they were feeding. The mother-scale skin phantom enjoyed drinking human blood, too, but it was difficult to tell how the two were related. Either way, he should try and complete the quest as soon as possible. With the armor, his strength would improve rapidly, which would then allow him to challenge those with much higher ranks and secure more resources. No, that wasn't right. How could a man like him allow the vampires to harm the innocent girls in the city? It was all for the sake of justice. Ling Ling, I've got us a job, a big one, said Mo Fan. Where are you? I'll be there right away. Ling Ling's tone was calm like always, which definitely did not belong to a girl her age. However, the fact that she arrived fairly quickly was a good indication that the little girl was extremely bored. After Ling Ling arrived, Mo Fan brought the little loli along and headed to the household of the deceased girl whose death Huo Tuo had witnessed, to see if they could find any useful clues there.